Software weak, too kind, too quiet. That's what they called you. They didn't say it to your face. They whispered it when you left the room, chuckled behind screens, laughed in group chats. You could feel it in the tone, in the sideways glances, in the way they spoke over you like you were furniture instead of fire. You weren't just overlooked. You were dismissed, labeled as prey in a world that worships predators. Every time you spoke with patience, they took it as silence. Every time you forgave, they called it submission. And every time you held back your storm, they mistook it for sunshine that couldn't burn. They thought you were soft, and in their world, soft meant weak. In their eyes, your empathy was a flaw. Your stillness was vulnerability. Your heart, a target. You tried to be good. You really did. You showed up when they didn't deserve you. You stayed when you should have walked. You gave more than you ever received, thinking that somehow, some way, it would come back to you. That maybe if you were kind enough, they'd stop hurting you. That maybe if you explained yourself better, they'd understand. You helped people who turned their backs on you. You defended the ones who laughed at you behind closed doors. You loved people who only knew how to drain. But the world doesn't always reward the good. No, sometimes it hunts them and you. You were prey walking through a jungle of wolves, convinced they wouldn't bite if you smiled hard enough. You bled for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You cracked your chest open to show them your soul, and they used it as a map to your destruction. They found your softness and decided it made you breakable. They watched you give until there was nothing left, and when you finally collapsed, when you were drowning in silence, screaming for someone to just see you, they turned their heads. Or worse, they watched and smirked. Some people get sick pleasure from watching someone like you fall. You remind them of everything they buried. You make them uncomfortable because your light reveals the shadows they try to hide. So they took joy in your suffering, mocked your breakdown, gossiped about your pain like it was entertainment. There were nights when the darkness didn't just surround you, it swallowed you. When the world felt too loud and your mind felt too fragile, you begged for signs, for miracles, for something, anything, to make the ache stop. But nothing came, just the echo of your own thoughts, getting louder, crueler. Maybe they're right, you thought. Maybe I am too soft for this world. You looked in the mirror and couldn't recognize yourself, not because you changed, but because they broke the reflection. Every insult, every dismissal, every betrayal, it shattered something inside you. Not just trust in others, but trust in yourself. That voice in your head, it started to sound like them. You're not enough. You're weak. You'll always lose. And the worst part? You believed it. You believed that being kind was the reason you suffered, that being compassionate was your curse. You started to question everything, your instincts, your worth, your right to take up space. You shrank, hoping the world would stop hurting you. But it didn't. It never does. Because the world doesn't stop when you fold. It keeps pushing, keeps biting, keeps testing. And all the while, the people who once called you soft kept climbing, stepping on your back, laughing as they rose higher. They fed off your doubt, off your hesitation, because as long as you questioned your strength, they didn't have to face it. But here's the truth they never told you. Soft doesn't mean weak. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. Kindness isn't surrender, it's restraint. What they saw as softness was a strength they couldn't comprehend. You weren't born fragile. You were born whole. They just kept trying to break the parts of you that made them feel inferior. And when you started to believe them, that's when you became vulnerable. Not because of your softness, but because you let their lies live rent-free in your mind. You gave the world gold, and it spat rust back at you. You offered light, and they threw shadows. But you kept showing up, bruised, tired, alone. And that says more about your power than any of their labels ever could. Because despite the betrayal, the mockery, the silence, you didn't become them. Not yet. But deep down, something shifted, something cracked. And beneath the broken mirror, the bleeding heart, and the whispered doubts, a question began to rise. Not a cry, not a plea. A declaration disguised as a whisper. What if they're wrong about me? There came a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when something inside you stopped apologizing. You didn't scream. You didn't announce it. It wasn't fireworks. It was a stillness. A sharp, cold silence that replaced the storm. You had begged, explained, waited for understanding, for peace, for someone to finally see the weight you were carrying. But that moment, that was the end of asking. No more bending to be accepted. No more softening your edges to protect people who only ever came close to cut. In that silence, something inside you turned to steel. Not armor you put on, but metal you became. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. You looked around and realized no one was coming to save you. And if no one was going to carry you, you'd crawl until your hands bled. If no one would clap, you'd train in the dark until the silence applauded. No more, you whispered. And this time, it wasn't a cry. It was a blade. You started to feel it, the fire beneath the skin. It wasn't rage for destruction. It was rage for resurrection, the kind that doesn't burn everything down, just everything fake. You stopped running from the pain and let it sculpt you. Every sleepless night was a set, every betrayal, another representative. You didn't go quiet because you were broken. You went quiet because you were building. They didn't see you crying behind closed doors. They didn't see your hands shaking with rage and restraint. They only saw you disappear. But that wasn't retreat. It was reformation. While they laughed, you were cutting fat from your life. While they mocked, you were sharpening. And every time the pain threatened to consume you, you looked it in the eyes and said, "Not today, not yet. I've got work to do." You weren't born hardened. You were born with fire. And now, the fire had direction. I was never soft, you muttered to the dark. I was unsharpened. And then, you buried the old you. No ceremony, no eulogy, just a quiet death in a place no one could find. You dug the grave with your own hands. Each scoop of dirt was a lesson, each tear a goodbye. You stood over the body of who you used to be, the one who waited, who begged, who longed to be understood, and you lit the match. You burned your need to be liked. You torched the desire to fit in. You watched the coffin go up in flames, and you didn't flinch. That wasn't a loss. That was a cleansing. Approval had been your cage. Love without respect had been your poison. So you let it all burn, the old beliefs, the old dependencies, the old softness that never served you. It died screaming in that fire. And from those ashes, something darker emerged. Not evil, not cruel, just focused, clean, cold in the ways it had to be. The version of you built not to please, but to endure. The monster was born, not out of hate, but out of mercy denied too many times. You learned something most people never will. Darkness doesn't mean defeat. Shadow isn't shameful, it's shelter. You don't owe the world your constant glow. You don't have to bleed just to keep others warm. You reclaimed your edge, piece by piece. You stopped softening your voice so fragile egos wouldn't shatter. You stopped saying yes when your soul screamed no. You weren't angry. You were exact. You weren't numb. You were selective. You wore your silence like armor. Not because you had nothing to say, but because you finally understood. Energy is currency, and not everyone deserves to be paid. You chose stillness not as surrender, but as strategy. The world called it cold. You called it necessary, because sometimes the only way to survive is to become the storm they never saw coming. And now you don't run from the dark. You walk in it. You own it. Because you finally realized soft was never the curse. Suppressed power was. They never saw the nights you trained in the dark. They saw you rise, but not the blood under your fingernails. They clapped at the glow, but they never witnessed the grind. While they slept, comfortable, deluded, you were building yourself from ruin, no applause, no spotlight, just the sound of your own breath and the echo of your own fury. Every rep was revenge. Every step was survival. You weren't chasing aesthetics. You were chasing resurrection. The pain didn't scare you anymore. It focused you. It sculpted you. You stopped waiting for the world to give you a reason, and you made your own. The suffering wasn't empty. It was sacred. It had meaning. You were sharpening your soul in silence, making war with your weakness. That gym, that grind, that silence, that was your cathedral. And the version of you that walked out of it didn't smile the same, didn't flinch the same, didn't need what you used to crave. Ruthless consistency became your religion. You showed up daily, especially when it hurt, especially when it felt like the weight of the world was crushing your chest. You showed up with cracked ribs and silent screams because you knew discipline was the only way out. It wasn't about motivation. It was about refusal. Refusal to stay broken. Refusal to die where they left you. You built an unshakable mind not through ease but through endurance, through repetition in the dark, through failure again and again, until success had no choice but to kneel. You stared down doubt and said, "You can scream all you want. I'm still going." They'll never understand the cost of your calm, how many wars you fought inside just to show up peaceful, how many demons you dragged behind you, still walking forward. And that silence they see now, it isn't emptiness, it's earned, it's armored, it's sacred. You started cutting ties, not with hate, but with precision. You stopped explaining yourself to people who only listened to respond. You stopped begging those who watched you bleed to suddenly grow a conscience. Loyalty used to be your leash. You gave it to everyone, thinking that history meant harmony. But you learned. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away. From the friend who keeps taking, from the family who only loves you when you shrink, from the version of yourself that needed validation, to feel real. You weren't being cold. You were being clear. You weren't abandoning people. You were choosing peace over poison. You stopped asking people to value what they were never built to hold. And in that silence, something sacred returned. Your power. They called it cold. You called it clarity. And then it happened. The transformation, not the glow-up they post online. The real kind. The one that terrifies people because they can't recognize you anymore. You weren't just healed. You were reborn. A new voice, a new walk, a new silence. The same soul, but tempered in fire. They looked at you like a stranger because you were. You're not who you were. You're who you forged, piece by piece, scar by scar. All the parts they broke, you rebuilt them stronger. All the pieces they left behind, you reassembled with precision. You didn't grow. You evolved, and that scares them. Because now their guilt has nowhere to hide. Their power over you is gone. Their labels don't stick. Their opinions don't sting. You moved on without permission. And that, more than anything, is unforgivable in their eyes. Now you move different. You walk like war, not loud, not reckless, but with purpose in every step. The armor you wear isn't made of metal. It's built from meaning. You don't need applause. You don't need validation. You don't even need to be understood. What you need is purpose, and that purpose is now your spine. Your calm is calculated. Your silence is strategy. Your peace is a product of pain turned into power. You stopped chasing the temporary highs of being seen and started building the eternal weight of legacy. They talk, they doubt, they whisper the same old words. Too intense, too much, too distant. But they don't see the war it took to become this. They don't know the cost, and that's fine. Let them wonder, let them watch. Because you're not soft anymore. You're untouchable. Funny how the same eyes that once mocked you now follow your every move. The same mouths that laughed behind your back now whisper your name with reverence or fear. They used to see you as harmless, forgettable, disposable. Now they double-check their tone before they speak your name. Now they watch, silent, stunned that the one they tried to break walks with this kind of power. But here's the truth they'll never say out loud. They didn't believe you'd make it. They didn't think you'd rise. They thought their silence would bury you. But instead it built you. Every smirk, every dismissal, every time they looked at you like you didn't belong, it was fuel. And now you don't walk to be seen. You walk because you know who you are. You didn't change for them. You became untouchable despite them. That's the wound that haunts them most. They had front row seats to your breaking, but they missed the becoming. And now they try to come back. Their messages sneak in like ghosts from a past that no longer fits. Just checking in. Miss you. Proud of you. But where were they when you were bleeding? Where were they when you cried yourself to sleep, doubting everything? They weren't late. They were absent. And absence has a cost. You don't hate them. You just remember. You remember who went quiet when you needed noise, who turned their backs when all you asked for was a hand. So no, they don't get access anymore. Growth isn't just about rising. It's about pruning. And you've outgrown their reach. They called you soft, and now they want to feel your warmth again. But that warmth isn't free. Not anymore. You can't betray me and still expect access. You burned the bridge and now you watch me fly over it. You're not petty. You're precise. And the door they walked out of? It no longer opens. You became something they can't define. Cold power. Warm core. They want to label you heartless now, because you no longer fold, because your boundaries don't bend, but they confuse healed with hardened. They mistake clarity for cruelty. You didn't lose your heart, you just stopped handing it to people with dirty hands. You didn't become cruel, you became exact. Your love? Still deep, still wide. But now it's reserved, selective, guarded by gates they no longer have keys to. You're kind, to the right people, loyal, to those who've bled with you, not against you. Your silence is no longer the mark of defeat, it's the sign of command. You listen more, react less. You don't chase, you attract, you don't explain. You just exist with a force that no longer needs translation. I'm not heartless. You whisper to yourself on the days doubt lingers. I'm healed. And those villains, the ones who mocked, ghosted, gossiped, now they drown in the flood of their own regret. You didn't have to seek revenge. You didn't have to destroy them. You just kept rising. And that rise, that was enough. Your presence is punishment. Your peace is their reminder. They thought they could break you quietly and keep winning loudly. But the echo of your success silences their stories. The version of you they tried to kill now lives in their nightmares. You became the storm they feared, not by screaming, not by striking back, but by surviving in silence and then soaring in power. You didn't clap back, you built back. And now they look at you with that hollow stare, the stare of someone who realizes too late that they bet against the wrong soul. You didn't just overcome, you outgrew. And the distance now? It's your protection. You don't explain anymore. Not because you're arrogant, but because it's unnecessary. You used to pour paragraphs into people's voids, trying to make them see your heart. Now you let your moves speak. Your presence speaks. Your proof speaks. You're not loud. You're undeniable. The need to convince has evaporated. You walk into rooms and shift the air. Your silence says what words never could. You are no longer in the business of proving, only producing. You've earned your peace with scars as signatures. Your silence is power. Your restraint is thunder held in the palm of your hand. Let them wonder. Let them guess. Let them fill in the blanks they were too blind to read the first time. Because now you don't beg to be seen. You choose who gets the privilege of seeing you. You used to explain. Now you just arrive. You walk like you own the ground now. Not out of arrogance, but out of resurrection. The slouch is gone. The hesitation buried. You don't lower your gaze anymore. You meet the world eye to eye, unblinking. Because you've died and come back with thunder in your lungs. There's a rhythm in your stride now. Steady, deliberate, unstoppable. You don't apologize for taking up space. You were made to stand tall, to step heavy. And every step echoes with everything you survived. You don't whisper your worth anymore. You let it radiate. You used to shrink in rooms, questioning your place. Now you expand them, demanding nothing, commanding everything. You walk like thunder. Not to intimidate, but because silence no longer fits your stride. The ground beneath you listens now. It remembers the weight of your suffering and rises to meet your feet. You don't follow the beat anymore. You are the drum, fear. You don't speak its language anymore. Not because you're invincible, but because you've danced with your demons and made them kneel. You faced hell and didn't just survive it. You set up camp in it, learned its terrain, used its fire to light your way back. What used to haunt you now fuels you. What used to paralyze you now moves beneath your control. You fear nothing, not because life stopped being brutal, but because you stopped flinching. Pain didn't break you. It built precision. Rejection didn't end you. It revealed your path. You're not numb. You're aware. You're not detached. You're deliberate. You've walked through every worst-case scenario and kept breathing. You don't need courage to act anymore. You've become the action itself, unshakable, rebuilt from the ashes of people who swore you wouldn't make it. And now, the only thing you fear is forgetting who you are. So you remember, with every breath, every step. I faced hell. I found home in it. I made it mine. Kindness lives in you, but not the kind they used to mistake for weakness. This is weaponized kindness, controlled, directed. It's the love of someone who can destroy you, but chooses not to. It's the mercy of the sharpened. You don't give it away cheaply anymore. You don't explain your heart to those who mock its beat, but to the ones who earn it. Your kindness is a fortress, a place of safety, of certainty. Because your strength didn't come from bitterness, it came from boundaries. You still feel deeply, still care fiercely, but now it's filtered through wisdom. You don't save those who set fire to you. You don't pour into cups that spit in yours. But when you choose to love, it's sacred, undeniable, unshakable. Not because you need to be needed, but because you've mastered yourself. That's power. That's strength. That's control. You're not heartless. You're healed. And that healing made you dangerous. You are the standard now. You used to chase approval. Now you set the bar. People whisper about you, not because they pity you, but because they study you. They mimic your silence, your routine, your discipline. They try to wear your mindset like a costume, not knowing it was forged in a furnace. You became the blueprint. Not because you asked to, but because you survived when you weren't supposed to. And now, the very ones who once dismissed you are desperate to decode you. But they can't. Because what you built can't be borrowed. Your peace wasn't gifted, it was earned. Your control wasn't taught, it was bled for. And your silence, that's not emptiness, that's legacy in motion. You're not chasing anymore, you're leading. And not from a stage, but from your steps, from your presence. You don't scream to be seen, you simply arrive, and the atmosphere adjusts. And then one day, you stand in front of the mirror, and for the first time, you don't see what they told you to see. You don't see weakness. You don't see softness as failure. You see power in the scars, beauty in the brutality. You see every moment that tried to destroy you and didn't. You see the nights you thought you wouldn't make it and did. You see a warrior. Not the kind that swings wild, but the kind that knows when to strike and when to stay still. You see someone who was never too soft, just unprotected, just misunderstood. But now you are armored in truth. You don't flinch at your reflection anymore. You bow to no one, but honor everyone who walked with you through fire. They saw you as fragile. Now they bow to your fire. Because you didn't just become strong. You became untouchable. And no one, not them, not the past, not even your doubt, can take that from you now.